Hello, 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 and a massive hello to everybody. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. This is 50 Pips rocking and rolling here, 17th of January, 2016. No trade calls or recommendations or response for their own stuff. We're here for educational purposes only. And the fact that you're listening to this means you've read to understand. You accept all disclosures, disclaimers on the blog, understanding that it's just some technical analysis for educational purposes only. So again, guys, what's happening? Keep in mind tomorrow, U.S. markets close, Martin Luther King holiday. Futures are going to be open half-day trading, so reduced trading. If you want to see the Globex schedule, just look at my Twitter feed. I tweeted that out. So again, really the focus here is going to be on the equity side. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. The focus is really, are we going to find some kind of support or not? Okay, so we've had some very interesting moves, some very aggressive trading, and if you see here, I think the most salient thing, the important thing here is, if you look, let's just put this up. You've got the so we can put the DAX bottom left, bottom right, the Dow, then we can have NASDAQ top right, and ES, so S&P minis top left. You see what's happening here. These are all weeklies, right? So we're coming into support zones, and we talked about the first attempt to hold this broader area on the ES that didn't manage to hold, but you see here we're coming into multiple support areas. So if there's going to be some kind of a bounce, this is where you'd expect it to come. Again, keep in mind markets can be fairly whippy and fairly light, but you know, if this is as good a place as any. I think the big question is here, are we going to find, are the markets just going to completely fall out of bed, or are they going to stabilize a little bit? I think most people will be looking to sell any kind of rally on any kind of bounce, but here I think the focus, what I wanted to highlight here, if you move back to the NQ top right, is that you see we're coming into, you know, there's some of the indices that are more extended than others, but we're clearly moving into support zones across the board. You look at the Dow, look at the DAX, right? So we're all fairly extended, but we're starting to move into support. So it looks like we could see some kind of bounces. Keep in mind that most likely the market will be in sell rallies mode. Now again, the move has been very, very aggressive, so we could see a fairly decent rally and it would still be corrective, right? So it'd still be corrective. So if we look at the ES in a little bit more detail, right, what are we looking for? So you see here we've moved back down and we see this low end of the range. These 1850s are catching a bid, right off this 1850. Below that, the next level is, you know, those 1814s, 1812s, that other dip that we see on the weekly coming in play. So right here, the focus is what's going to happen as we come into the week. So this is Friday low. This was that hold on Thursday where we got that rally where everybody thought that we'd put in a short-term bottom, which just completely gave back. The market gave it all back on Friday. You know, very aggressive move, not usual after this kind of bounce, after such an aggressive move down, for it to completely give it all back. So right here, the focus for me is really on those Thursday lows, right? If when we open in the overnight session, depending on how the market reacts here, hold below very, very heavy, I'd expect the market to try and take a stab at those 1850s. If we can hold below, then we would expect those 1900s to attract. Now keep in mind that the focus, a lot of the focus is going to be on how, you know, what happens also with crude and oil. We had all that Iran news over the weekend. Saudi markets opened very aggressively to the downside. So, you know, you'll see a lot of wheeling and dealing on crude in consequence on CAD, etc., etc. So we'll have to see what happens there. But in terms of the ES, the levels I'm looking at is I'm looking at those Thursday's lows as the kind of midpoint, the pivotal level for Momo and flows, and to the downside, possible aggressive action towards 1850s, to the upside, possible aggressive action back into the 1900s. Now, this is where the fight is going to be held. Momo below 1850, then I would expect to see possible 40 handles to the downside very, very quickly. 1812s being challenged. If we get some kind of traction, we start to get some stabilization back above the 1900, I would not be surprised to see 1950s coming into play very quickly too. Again, should start to see a lot of selling interest coming right back into all these levels. But so this is what I'm focused on the ES going into the week. I think those are the most interesting zones, and I think that's really the main focus, or where most interesting opportunities will come. If you look at something like Euro, it's just kind of like standing by, just watching. We'll have to see what happens. We discussed about this broader range here on the Euro with 107s to the downside, 110s to the upside. This is just a lot of chop both sides. I would not be surprised to see this try to pop back into the 110. I would not be surprised to see it back into 107. Keep in mind, this is pretty much going to be linked to the ES. They're moving in opposite fashion, so a lot of chop. As far as I'm concerned, it's a lot to do about nothing. Velocity of move inside range, unless we don't start to get daily closes outside these levels. I think there's just a lot of two-way chop. We might be waiting until the ECB. We'll have to see what happens. I haven't been too focused on Euro. I don't think that's where the opportunities have been. The opportunities, as far as I'm concerned, have been on crude, on ES, right? Not so much on Euro or cable, so I really haven't been focused on those. As far as gold is concerned, right, if you look at the daily, we're still stuck. We discussed this in the last Sunday Outlook, that we expected last week to see a lot of chop inside the 100 DMA and the 50 DMA, and you see how we've just been stuck here, and this is still a lot of chop right here. And until the market really decides what to do, we'd expect to see a lot more chop. As we say, if we don't get a daily close above the 100 DMA, or we don't get a daily close below the 50 DMA, we don't expect to see too much going on. We expect to see a lot more choppy action. Again, this probably linked to the ES, but looking for direction around this 1100, and the way we look at it is daily close back above this 100, possible ramp back into the 1150s, daily close below the 50 DMA, drop into the 1050s with this 1100 still being the pivotal level, and stuck right here inside this area. So I don't think there's an awful lot of interesting opportunities in some of the other pairs in terms of the forex. Again, you know, CAD's just rallying higher, taking out one round number after the other. Probably we have to wait and see what happens into the BOC. A lot of people looking for another rate cut. It's going to depend a lot also on what happens on crude. A lot of people trying to catch cable. We're not huge fans when it's so aggressive. Clearly, sooner or later it's going to bounce, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense to try and be aggressive on those currency pairs. I think there's a lot more interesting in the equities, and especially when you see the ES moving in such a wide range. Clearly there's no reason to, like, as far as we're concerned, to try and trade suboptimal pairs or charts where you've got so much action going on the ES. We think that's really the key. So let's see what we get going into the week. Keep in mind, we do have a lot of central banks on the wires. Keep in mind, the open is going to be very interesting also, because US markets are closed rather tomorrow for the holiday, apart from the Globex having a reduced session time. And again, let's see what happens, but we should get some interesting action this week. Focus again, equities and crude. Have an awesome one. Thanks for listening. I'll post the recording, guys. Bye-bye.